Hello, welcome back. Welcome back. Another live stream. It's Saturday night. It's the 9th of November. I'm doing another live tonight, which I do every night on the channel here to talk all things whiskey, to talk all things about single malt, to see what we're doing, to see what we're tasting, trying a few things along the way, and talking about certain subjects that people love to discuss, people love to talk about, and dispel some myths, learn a few things, taste a few things, discuss outturn, discuss whiskey, and that's what I love doing in this. I'm going to try and keep the focus mostly around spirits, of course. I predominantly talk about whiskey because it's part of a whiskey club, and what we do is predominantly whiskey, but occasionally we bottle things like rums and cognacs and armagnacs and whatnot, but I'm going to keep the focus around the whiskey side of things, at least for the moment, because there's a few things I wanted to touch on, and I want to thank everyone for joining in. Rain Farmer, Just Dramming, with Whiskey Saurus, Ruff, 2, Adrian, Benoit, forgive me, drinking some wine tonight. Yeah, wine's okay. I mean, it's okay, I guess, if you like wine. I don't drink as much wine as I used to. I really used to drink a lot of red. I loved my big sort of Australian reds for a long time there. A good sort of 6-7 years of great red wines. But I don't know, your palate changes and you're less in... The bottles keep... There's bottles all over this desk. You can't see bottles too much. It's nice and clear in the camera line, but outside of it, if you can hear this, it's just on both sides, just bottles everywhere. So that's called just being having stock all over the desk is always fun. Will Sue, Rolf 2, thanks for asking to join, but I'm just going to keep this one a bit solo tonight. So the topic, I did a tasting last night at the Royal Automobile Club for their members. And it was quite a beginner crowd. They were learning all sorts of things about whiskey and gin and mixing it together and finding different flavors through mixing and through different sort of ways of preparing the drink. Very basic though. I'm not a cocktailologist. I'm not a mixologist. I don't do that kind of stuff. I'm not that good at that kind of thing. So I just we focus on some simple ways of doing things. However, good to see you, Cal. However, there is one question I'm often asked at these events, and there's lots of questions I'm often asked. They include, how did you get into this? Should I add ice? When do I add ice? Those kind of things. The answers will come. We could do all sorts of sessions on these. But I got asked a question last night, which comes every so often, which is, should we? The event was great. Thanks, Cal. I'm just talking about that now. So I was asked a question last night. Was, now for my whiskey at home, should I use a decanter? This is the only decanter that I own, I think, and this is a very simple glass decanter. There is a stopper for it. I can't find it. That's sort of an indication of how often I use this. I don't really use it, if I'm being honest, because when you buy whiskey these days, it comes in a glass bottle already, and so unless you've got a really nice sort of cut crystal lead-free decanter, then I don't know. This isn't exactly a very high-end one. It's just a nice decanter, but it's that modern sort of look that I like in a bottle shape or in a decanter. But however, it's not really something you use that often. So the reason why I don't use it very often. Let's talk history for a second. Let's rewind through history for a moment here. Back when the society started, 1983, but even prior to that, when Pip was just discovering about how to form a syndicate, it was quite common, not common, but it was more common for distilleries to sell quarter casks and small casks formats to private customers and shops because it's cheaper. Back then, glass was still quite expensive. So we've got to think about that for a second. Let's put some historical perspective into this. Glass was quite expensive up until recently, historically speaking. And it was cheaper and more economical to ship spirits in oak, which is, I guess, a lot of the byproduct of how maturation of spirits came to be a thing. Even it was the shipping of spirit, of whiskey, of new make spirit, in wooden containers, wooden vessels, wooden oak containers that gave them this flavour that was deemed desirable. So even back as early as even just as late as the 1970s, this was like. Yes, there was still, distilleries were bottling into glass then. It wasn't like, 60 years ago it wasn't a thing, or 50 years ago, whatever. It was more just a case of it was just cheaper and economical to ship in wood rather than to ship in glass. However, glass has gotten cheaper to produce and things change. Diana, good to see you. You're on your personal account tonight. Calte, yes, I just mentioned that I used to drink a lot more red wine. I still love red wine. I still love a glass of red with some dinners and stuff like that. I just don't open bottles of wine so much anymore. I'm just less interested in red wine as I used to be a lot more interested in it, and just not as much anymore. Yeah, that's a funny question, Just Drowning. I'll get to that in a second. But let me just finish this history for a moment. So shipping in wood was one of the main things that changed the whiskey industry at that time. And so, and then, as I said, glass was quite expensive. Then a lot of distilleries started shipping in ceramic at some point as well. I don't know enough research about this, but I should do. But I'm going to learn more about it. But I've got here two examples that often sit on the speakers behind me here. That's an old Bell's Scotch whiskey ceramic sort of bottling. I'll show that one to the camera. It's going to be backwards, but you'll get the idea. I'm on front camera tonight. Sorry, I didn't set up in time. But that's a sort of, you can say, like a Bell's Scotch whiskey ceramic old bottle. It's lost its topper at some point, but I found that at an op shop for $3, so it looked fun. And then another op shop find, McCallum's, not Macallan, McCallum's Perfection Scots whiskey, Edinburgh, founded in 1807. The dating on this particular bottle, I've got no idea. I'd say this was probably produced 1960s, something like that, almost like a Curo, 1960s or 1970s. It's in pretty good condition. Still got the cork in it, bit spider webby, but still there. Look at that, that's kind of cute. And can't see anything inside that, of course. The cork is actually in reasonably great condition considering the age. Well, I think it's about 1960s. It could even be sort of something that was a replica from the 80s or 90s or something. But it was becoming more popular to ship in ceramic at one point as well, because again it was cheaper than glass and it was more readily used. And but then of course glass took over in the end, and now that became the main way that that people sort of drink whiskey from. Getting back to my original point, that's why I'm not a huge fan of decanters. Your whiskey already comes in a glass bottle. If you want to have a nice looking decanter on your home bar at home or something, there's nothing wrong with using a decanter. However, the 2 points I'll give you about this is moving whiskey from one bottle to another, through the air, and having a big decanter will oxidize your whiskey a little bit faster than usual. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily always. Oxidization can improve some whiskies, as we've talked about before. And the second thing I'll mention is you just want to avoid using any lead-based decanters. So lead-based crystal is not a thing anymore these days. It's like, leaded petrol or leaded crystal. It's not a thing anymore. And, you don't want that carcinogenic crystal infusing your whiskey and giving you cancer. So what you do is avoid the lead-based ones. Now, the way to do that is you can pretty much tell when they're lead-based crystal because they're old school crystal, crystal gear. However, the way to just mostly if you see crystal decanters in op shops, really old style sort of 1960s, 70s decanters, they're probably lead-based crystal, but modern ones aren't. So if you want to grab a modern decanter, I know Waterford makes some nice ones. I know Norland make one now as well, which is a very modern looking sort of sleek thing for $300 or something. I don't like them. I don't like decanters, but if you use one, that's your call. It's a nice way to sort of present whiskey in your home or office or something, wherever you want it. But it's just not, it's almost these days, because we're sort of replicating fixing a problem that no longer needs fixing, if that makes sense. So that's my sort of tips on decanters. I'm just going to answer some of the questions coming through on the Instagram live. For those who are watching on YouTube later, I'll repeat the question anyway. Just Ramming asks, what are your thoughts on using argon gases open bottles to better preserve? It helps wine, but not sure about whiskey. Just Ramming, I have used argon gas before in bottles, and I don't know, I can't tell if it's helped it, if it's kept it from oxidizing. Quite honestly, I don't think you need it, for 2 reasons. One is that some whiskies, in fact many whiskies I'd argue, improve with oxidization. We're improved with not having argon gas, with a bit more oxygen in the bottle. Here's a challenge for you. Open a really sherried whiskey, whether it be a single cask, whatever it is. Open a sherried whiskey, pour 2 or 3 drams out of the bottle, and then leave at least get down to about sort of there or something on the bottle, and you'll find that after you've gotten around 2/3, if you've got about 2/3 left in that bottle, it'll actually start improving. I reckon the whiskey, most sherry whiskeys actually improve with a bit of time in bit of age in the air. So that's I think that's a good thing. Some older whiskies might lose a bit of that sort of nice edge they had when you first opened them, and most peated whiskies fall off a cliff after even just a few weeks of being opened, I find. But it's all very subjective, of course. And by fall off a cliff, I mean they're still lovely to drink, but they lose that big peaty edge that they had when they first cracked the seal on them. I hope that answers your question. I don't use argon. I have tried it before. I don't regularly use it. I've got a canister in here somewhere still. There's too many things in the office. Anyway, I've got to do a clean out. Calte Y asks why I fell out of love with reds. I still like reds. I just don't have the. It's just that there's two things. There's only so many drinks you can fit in a day, and if I'm gonna enjoy a drink, I mostly enjoy whiskey these days. It's just where my palate is. Your palate changes, your tastes change. I love a big red still. In fact, no, I'm actually gonna take that back. I love a light red these days. I love things like Pinots and certain light French wines. Some lovely Italian wines as well. But I'm not, and I love heavy whites. So give me a really oaky Chardonnay and things like that, and even like a nice old Riesling. There's some lovely wine I still enjoy, but it's still your palate changes, and a wine matched course with dinner can be a lovely experience. But just I can have a dram just about any time of day, after 12 o'clock or something, and I'll enjoy that. But I've got to be in the right mood for wine these days. I'm just just a little bit less interested as I used to be. Grant Sharon, great. Good to see you, Grant. Every single night I'm doing a live stream, so it's good to see you in here. Can you use a decanter and use American/French oak chunks or strips to age a young new make whiskey? No, you cannot, Cal. Well, you can, but it's going to be a very undesirable result. Every year, and I guarantee you it's already starting to happen now because we're heading into Christmas, every year coming into Christmas, there's some gimmicky product about hyper-aging your whiskey with improved whiskey by putting an oak stave in a bad bottle, can turn a $30 bottle into tasting like a $150 bottle with an oak stave, or an oak brush that goes into the bottle and neck, or things like that, which is it's all nonsense. So that you can't. I'll say this. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. You cannot cheat maturation. You cannot cheat maturation. Now I'm going to get in trouble from there's certain sort of quite, quite progressive distilleries out there that are doing things like sonically aging whiskey and hyper-aging through different scientific methods and cask vibration and playing sonic waves through it and blah, blah, blah. They sometimes produce interesting results. I would say not always desirable, but I wish them all the best, and I hope but it's just not my thing. Petrino11 joined. Petrino, congratulations! I just saw your post on just buying a house, so that's fantastic and well done. I would avoid using a decanter to put oak chunks or staves or pieces in. It's unnecessary. It's Highway to Valhalla. Good to see you, and Blackwood Studios. Good to see you, James. So that was my take on decanters. They solved a problem back in ye old times for a problem that was needed solving. These days they are purely aesthetic. Of course, it's an aesthetic choice to use a decanter. Like I said, I don't personally use one, but if you want to use one, go for it. It's just that it's a personal preference of what you enjoy and how you want to present your whiskey. I just think these days there's so many lovely whiskies with such lovely whiskey bottle shapes and designs that you don't need to worry about, tarting up an otherwise stuffy old bottle of blended whiskey that may have looked terrible back in the day and looks better in a decanter now. But what about maturation in a 20-litre cask of port or wine cask, SA? I'm assuming you mean SA cooperage. Yeah, I mean, sorry. I'll keep bumping that chair. I assume you mean, maturation in a 20-litre cask. I'm not I think I did one of my Monday rants on this about 20-litre casks, but maybe I need to rehash one maybe this Monday coming. Well, let's talk 20-litre casks on Monday, and let's talk oak gimmicks tomorrow night. So there's two subjects coming up. I'll have to keep myself a note, because otherwise I'll forget. But it's Sunday night, we're going to talk about oak gimmicks and how there's a few things coming out to market. And then Monday will be the rant. And we might cap off on some 20-litre action. In a nutshell, 20-litre casks are not great. They're good for hobbies, they're good for projects, they're good for a bit of fun. But the problem is with the humidity and temperatures in Australia, it matures the spirit too quickly. And so what you end up with after 2 years, so you can legally call it whiskey, if you put new make spirit into a 20-litre cask and you wait 2 years, most of the time, not all the time, but you're playing the odds pretty much against yourself here. Most of the time you end up with what I like to call, and I've heard this phrase a few times, what I like to call is a over-oaked, under-mature spirit. So hear that out, over-oaked but under-mature spirit. So there's something really in that, and that's quite true, in that you find this, you'll end up with a spirit that is overcooked because it's had too much wood to spirit surface area, and under-mature. Now let's pretend for a second you had the option to do something. Let's pretend for a second that you have the other end of the spectrum, and you suddenly end up with yourself like 1,000-litre cask, or a ton, as they're known as. So what happens if you mature whiskey in those, in tons, or in 1,000-litre casks? They're quite massive, the tons, of course. You know, they're nearly 400 litres bigger than a sherry butt, so they do look almost about twice the size. It requires a team of people to move them and transport them. These are the ton does the other end of the spectrum of a 20-litre. It doesn't provide enough wood surface area to spirit ratio, so therefore the spirit doesn't mature in it. And if it did, you'd need to leave it in the ton for 50, 60 years for it to have any sort of effect in Scotland. But that's why most distilleries that use tons in Scotland, like Balvenie, this is the only distillery that comes to mind actually, but I know, there's quite a few that use tons, and they use them for marrying spirit. So they use them for maturing mature spirit, or semi-mature spirit, and marrying it in the ton. And they use it as a way to sort of, blend together the single malts, different casks from the distillery to create their single malt or to create a particular product. So that's really quite, Ad Moen, thanks for joining. That's really quite something in that it's the opposite of that. So that's a problem. Using a ton to mature whiskey is a problem on the extreme end of the spectrum, and using a 20-litre to mature whiskey is a problem. And anyone who tells you otherwise is either trying to sell 20-litre whiskey or doesn't know what they're talking about. Sorry. And I know that's really quite blunt. Anyway, but that was my my little sort of, my, not a rant, but my take on that for tonight. I've pulled myself a dram of something special here, which is I won't tell you what this is. No, I'm kidding. This is actually something that was released a long time ago by the Society, and it was a lovely cask from Distillery 9.140, and it was called Honey and Spice Poached Pear. So I'm just enjoying a dram of that tonight as I talk a little bit about decanters. We started about decanters, but I got off on a tangent talking about tons for some reason. Cal does that to me. Don't worry, I get on tangents and I answer some questions. That's all from me tonight. That was the video just to talk about. Well, we could do an Armagnac session, Cal. That'd be cool. We could talk about Armagnacs maybe tomorrow night. I don't know. I'll mix it up. You tell me where you want to go, and we'll have a bit of fun with it. That's what this live stream is about. Just for us to have a chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button, because I'd love you to see these videos, especially because we're putting up one almost every single day, and you can learn a bit about whiskey. And it's I'm not here to sell you anything. We're just here to have a bit of fun and talk whiskey. And for those watching on Instagram, thank you so much for joining in live, or if you're watching in the story up above in your screen later on, that's also great. Over and out for now, and I'll see you all tomorrow night. Happy dramming and cheers.